My name is Dr. John Zawislak. I'm a flight director meteorologist for the NOAA Hurricane Hunters. We have a booth just outside this door. Here we're joined by Dan Tyson, who's one of our P3 flight engineers. Billy Weisinger is down here in the blue suit. He's also one of the flight engineers. And out at the table, you'll meet one of our public affairs officials, Sophie Talbert, and then one of our P3 and King Air pilots, Andrew Reeves. So we're not quite storm chasers, we're hurricane hunters. And I get that, we're kind of chasing the storms, aren't we? But we just want to give you a little bit of a feel of what the hurricane hunters do. So we're not on the ground. We're not in cars going into storm surge or anything like that. We're a professional organization, part of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration that's under the Department of Commerce, NOAA. So you heard of the National Weather Service, you heard of National Hurricane Center, right? A lot of those major forecasting centers. We're part of NOAA, and we're the Aircraft Operations Center. So we have 10 aircraft at the Aircraft Operations Center, or AOC. We are based in Lakeland, Florida, so about an hour and 45 minutes north of here. So we are part of this hurricane community. We not only fly hurricanes with aircraft, collecting critical data sets, getting the data to the Hurricane Center, to the models, getting you the information you need to understand what the impacts of the storm will be, but we're also in the path of storms as well. So we just wanted to pay a visit, give you information, talk to you, because we're all part of this hurricane community who have to respond to the storms, prepare for storms, and because it is May 30th, tomorrow is the official start of hurricane season and really the big part of our year, which is flying hurricanes. So just want to give you a little insight into what it's like to fly a hurricane, why we fly aircraft in hurricanes, and really what the end result of that is. So bear with us. There's going to be some cool imagery. There's going to be some really neat videos of flying in hurricanes, and you're going to hear from Dan Tyson here as well about actually physically flying that aircraft. So in service at the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center, we have other aircraft. We have Twin Otters. These are twin engine aircraft that fly SEAL surveys, other types of survey projects. But for the hurricane aircraft, our main workhorses are those P3 aircraft. Those are 4-engine turboprop aircraft. They were originally sub-finders, sub-reconnaissance aircraft. This aircraft are now 50 years old for us. They fly like they're new, but they are 50 years old. These aircraft are nicknamed Kermit and Miss Piggy. They tend to fly, we fly about 8,000 to 10,000 feet in the storm environment. We're not flying around the storm, we're not flying over top of the storm, we're flying through the eye wall, we're flying through the turbulence, we're getting rocked around trying to get the data that you need to understand the storm. The G4 there is a Gulfstream aircraft. It's kind of a converted business jet. It flies 41 to 45,000 feet. That one does fly a little bit higher in the storm. It doesn't go through eye walls. It doesn't like that kind of turbulence, but it flies around the storm environment. And what that aircraft is actually doing is measuring the environment ahead of the storm. So the aircraft on the left here, the P3s, that's trying to get at the intensity. We're trying to get how strong the storm is, how big the storm is. That helps the intensity forecast. How strong is it going to be when it makes landfall? That aircraft in the center there, the jet, that's going more at the track forecast. So we're trying to get into the front of the storm, all the steering currents that could impact the storm, we're trying to get out in front of it and get a better track forecast. The aircraft on the right is actually one of our light aircraft, the King Air. It's a twin-engine turboprop. We do not fly that in the storm. It just can't handle that. It flies too slow. We already fly slow enough with the P3. But what that aircraft does is actually aerial image areas that get damaged by hurricanes. So when you look at that aerial imagery, our aircraft are actually out there post-storm looking at all the damage that may have occurred at that landfall, trying to find the areas where emergency managers need to deploy resources. So it may not be a hurricane hunter, but it's a key part of our operation because it gets us after the storm to tell you where the damage is. Oop, here we go. So a little bit of what it like visually to fly through a storm. I'm not sure which video that audio is from, but you can see actually Dan is in this upper left. This is a Category 4 storm up in the cockpit. He's working the throttles. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a bit. But that's a little bit bumpy, right? So yes, it's rainy. It is loud. The engines are loud. Everything about these storms are loud, and it gets pretty kicking up there. It does get pretty kicking, I promise you. Believe it or not, this is really only a small percentage of the storms. Most storms, in our perspective, are pretty in terms of turbulence. But there is a small percentage of storms. You can hear a little grapple there hitting these little Dippin' Dots hitting the airplane. Lost the camera. A little bit of a bump there, right? So this is kind of that extreme end of the kind of turbulence. So how many people get airsick? All right, we have a sign-up sheet right here. You're not flying with us. Well, we want to make sure you know your names if you show up on our manifest. So yeah, it is pretty bumpy in there. But I tell you what, the views are worth it. And I don't know if we're going to get the view. We are going to get the view. So yes, You get bumped around in the eye wall, you get to the center of the storm. The eye is the clear area of the storm, that's the center of the storm. That's that calm region. So through all that violent turbulence, through all that chaos and all that noise, when you emerge into a Category 5 eye like this one, and the stadium effect, as we call it, that ring stadium of cloud, it is quite a remarkable view. We understand the storm's dangerous, but you kind of have to marvel at the view of a Category 5 stadium effect like that. But this is why we do it, right? All the views, they're neat, but we collect data to help respond to this, right? This is why we're up here. This is why we want to talk about our mission, why we talk about our job, and why we do all the training on safety, operating the aircraft, understanding the weather, right? Maintaining the aircraft. This is why we do it, right? It's for the communities who are impacted by these storms. We go out as far as 7 days before it even is a thought of hitting land, hitting the United States. We're out there flying, getting the data that's needed to improve the forecasts, to understand the hazards, the storm surge, the severe weather, right? The wind speed, the rainfall, all of those hazards that you experience when storms make landfall. Hopefully you've maybe evacuated, but this is what we're trying to, we can't prevent damage, but we can help you respond and understand what you may encounter. So just a little bit of a look of the links in the chain, as I call it. We're all really important, the links in the chain. So this is just an example of Hurricane Helene last year, which is a very notable storm, not only for the impact of the Big Bend region of Florida as a major hurricane, but the amount of rainfall that it flooded in the Appalachia region. We were starting to fly this storm all the way down there at the bottom in the Caribbean is when we started flying this storm. So we flew for several days watching this storm evolve. Now we get tasked by the National Hurricane Center. They call us up, say, I need data in a storm. They send us out. We go collect that data. So that's kind of this tasking part where the aerial reconnaissance happens. Us as the NOAA hurricane hunters, and then also the Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters based in Biloxi, we both combine forces to go out there and fly the storm continuously, increasing the frequency as the storm gets closer and closer to landfall. And that is collecting data. We are as good as the observations we collect. We are as good as the quality of that data we collect and getting to the Hurricane Center, getting to the models. So we get that data to the models, and what ends up happening is that the Hurricane Center and other operational centers create products. And I call those public products because that's the products you see on TV. That's the track forecast, the cone forecast, the storm surge forecast, the severe weather forecast. They take all this information, it goes to the models, helps the models, gives them a view of what's happening out there, and then they issue these products and communicate with emergency managers to tell you guys and communicate to you what you may encounter if you were in the path of the storm. So we're a part of this link in the chain of the Hurricane Center, the folks, the forecasters who know how to use this data. We collect it, and then it gets in the hands of the folks who can help you understand what we're about to encounter in a landfall. I'm going to turn to Dan because he's up there, up front in this cockpit, and it's really cool. So you can tell you a little bit about flying a storm.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. I'm just here for the comic relief, really. I don't really have a job. No. So as you can imagine, and as you saw in the videos earlier, there's a lot going on in the flight station and while we're going through that turbulence. So what we try to do is minimize and just scope lock on one single thing or one little objective. So there's 3 people in the flight station. You have a pilot, co-pilot, and I sit as the center as the flight engineer. What the co-pilot is trying to do is just maintain wings level and keeping the plane level. So just little small baby tasks. And we have autopilot set up. It's not fully activated, but it's just kind of helping with the dampening of those surface areas. Myself in the center, what I'm trying to do is maintain 210 knots while going through. Sometimes that's a little hard to do. So there's a little gauge and I'm just trying to read it. I get bounced around and my eyes don't adjust. So it's kind of weird. If we go too fast, it could cause the aircraft to kind of come from together in certain parts. If we go too slow, there's a possibility that we actually will stall out of the sky. So we try to maintain that smooth 210 knots at all times. So working in conjunction with the pilot and controls, I'll either tell them, hey, I'm at max power, we're not speeding up. So they'll nose over the aircraft to kind of increase speed, or hey, we're going too fast, I have power all the way out, and they'll lift up the aircraft to try to burn off some of that airspeed that's going. The other pilot, what they're doing is making sure, one, checking us that we're on parameters at all times, that we're at 210, the wings are level, we're stabilized, and they're also working with the flight director at that point to kind of make sure that we're going the right heading or the right direction. We can't fly directly to where we want to go, so we have to be a little offset because that wind's going to push us all the way to our center point, which we get from the flight director and their information.
That's an excellent explanation. I don't know. I think I've seen shaky hands after a flight from our flight engineers. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot.
To maintain that altitude, the airspeed, and get that aircraft in the right direction. So just walk through a little bit about what a day like is for us. So as a flight director, I'm a meteorologist. I brief the air crew in terms of what we're going to fly through. It is a hurricane. It is a lot of turbulence. That's the kind of the standard brief, but I'll brief what we're going to get en route, where their landing weather is, what the takeoff weather is. But we're going to set up a pattern in the storm. So let's just take this major hurricane here. You can see the eye right there in the middle of the storm. And we're going to set up our passes. So we're doing perpendicular passes, several through the storm center itself. So we'll set up a west to east pass here, for example. We're going to descend down in the storm. We fly at about 10,000 feet or 8,000 feet pressure altitude. I'll talk about that in a second, what that means. But essentially, we're going to start flying towards the center of the storm. And we're going to drop. You'll see some on the table out there, what's called a dropson. It's a little measuring device with a parachute. We drop it out of the airplane. It goes down to the ocean surface, measures pressure, temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, directly through the atmosphere all the way down to the ocean from where the aircraft was. And we're going to drop those sons all along the way, also sampling other data as well. So just these little blue dots are going to show up as our dropson distribution. So we drop at the entrance, we drop in the midpoint to the center, we drop in the eye wall because we want to know what the peak winds are. We drop exactly in the center. That's my job, is to tell the pilots to get the exact zero wind center of the storm. And then we'll do the same thing outbound. We'll drop the sons all the way on the outbound leg. And then as we head downwind and we go for our second pass, all this data is coming off the aircraft. Some of it needs to be quality controlled. That's some of our jobs to do. Others is just automated. But our job is to get data off the airplane. That's why we're out there. So we're going to send, I don't understand the messages. Don't worry about what these messages say. But they're essentially telling us what the pressure is, the temperature, the wind speed, the wind direction. That message in the upper right is actually telling the Hurricane Center what the eye characteristic is. What was the peak wind coming in, coming out? Was it a circular eye? Did it have a funky shape? What was the eye size? All that information is what we translate to the Hurricane Center. We'll talk about that radar later at the end. And then we do a second pass, and we're going to do it all again. And we're essentially just going to rinse and repeat all the way through the storm, dropping those dropsons, collecting the data. Now, the difference between us and the Air Force Hurricane Reserve Hurricane, or the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters, is we're a research organization as well. So we are a laboratory. Our aircraft are laboratories. People bring instrumentation on for the future. What's the next technology that can measure all these key variables? So we might drop ocean expendables. So we drop buoys into the ocean. They measure temperature, salinity of the ocean. We might drop stuff already in the ocean. These are ocean gliders. They're autonomous vehicles that are profiling the ocean up and down in various parts of the Caribbean and Gulf. There's sail drones out there. They're autonomous, basically autonomous sailboats that are all across the Atlantic and Caribbean and the Gulf. They're measuring that key area between the atmosphere and the ocean. The ocean drives hurricanes. The heat of the ocean drives hurricanes. But how it interacts with the atmosphere is really important. Now, we don't fly our airplanes down there, but we have ocean gliders and we have drones. So that's a Black Swiss S0. That's one of the experimental drones we're dropping out of the airplane, little small airplane, dropping out of the big airplane, and it actually flies all the way down to the ocean surface, flying where we don't want to take our manned aircraft. So throughout the entire pattern, we are just plugging the storm full of all these observations, trying to get an understanding of the size, the wind speed, the rainfall, the kind of hazards that it may have when it makes landfall. Now, here's an actual, this is looking out the nose. This is Hurricane Patricia, which is the strongest storm the P3's ever flown, 879 millibars. That would be like being at 4,500 feet in altitude, but at the surface. What you're going to see is we fly pressure surfaces. Now, the pressure is lower in the center of the hurricane, so that surface is actually lower in the center of the hurricane. So we're not just flying straight, we're actually descending into the eye wall all the way to the bottom, and then we're ascending out of the storm. So what you're going to see in a Category 5 Hurricane Patricia is we're not pointing straight. The aircraft is going to be pointing at the ocean when we come in, because we are pitched so far nose down. There it is. So that's the eye of a Category 5 hurricane. You can actually see the ocean surface there at center, just off the nose. That's over 180 mile per hour winds in the eye wall of a Cat 5. And what you're going to see when we come level is we're following the pressure surface. So when we get to the exact center, we're going to start leveling out at the bottom of that pressure surface. My job as FD at this point is to find the exact center. So what you're going to see is the airplane is going to make a series of turns. Those are turns, me calling the tracks. I wasn't the FD, but equivalent. They're calling tracks to get the exact center of the storm. Okay. My job is then to get us out. So as soon as I mark that center, I'm going to find the outbound track. And so what they're going to do is look at the radar in front of them. We're going to figure out where the most intense convection is. Do I need a different outbound track? I'll find my path out. I'll call that outbound track to the flight crew. They'll turn the airplane to that location. And what you don't appreciate at this point is the airplane's actually pitched up and it's climbing out of the eye. Okay, going into the outbound eye wall. Again, this is about 180 knots or almost 200 mile per hour Cat 5 hurricane. Just an extreme example of what it's like. We are descending into the eye, us sending out. So it's not just about airspeed. The airplane's pitched quite aggressively. But because we want to stay perpendicular to the wind, it's really important that we stay perpendicular. We're actually crabbing into the wind. So we're not flying straight. The nose is actually pointed over to the left and over to the right. So I call ground track. Our ground track is perpendicular. The way the nose points is completely different. So just an example here, we're going to do a little pass. Don't worry about those images in the right and left. It'll become clear in a second. We're going to fly from the northwest to the southeast through the eye of this really major hurricane. I kind of denoted the eye wall. You can see the clear eye there. So what this is going to look like is as we get closer and the wind speeds come up as we get towards the eye wall, the airplane is going to be pointing further and further and further off to the left. We're flying to the right, but the airplane's pointing to the left. And then when we go outbound from the center, we go out to the southeast, now the nose is pointing all the way to the right, but we're flying to the left. So we have to adjust our eyesight when we look at radars and stuff like that. We have to look off nose in order to know what we're flying through. But how much? In a Category 5 hurricane, like the one you just saw where we're getting 100, keep in mind, we're flying 210 knots. We can experience 200 knot winds at flight altitude, which means we're pointed typically in a Cat 5 about 40 to 45 degrees off of where we're actually flying. So just the challenges of flying a hurricane. You're going up, you're going down, you're crabbed, you're getting turbulence, the up and down. Pretty extreme environment. But these eyes can do some really crappy stuff to us sometimes, right? These eye walls, they're the peak winds, they got a lot of stuff. So yes, maybe you'll get a perfectly circular eye, easy in and out, or you'll get a case like this. That is the eye of Hurricane Ian, Category 5, before it hit Fort Myers Beach. We were one of the last aircraft in there before Hurricane Ian made landfall. That image on the right is one of our radars on board our airplane. So that clear area in the middle there is the eye. What's circled there is the western eye wall. Now you see all those little tiny, we call them scallops? That rocked the airplane so much they had to abort the flight. It doesn't look like much. For me as a meteorologist, it doesn't look like much, but it's adding a lot of side motion. So it's not just the up and downs, the roller coaster ride, that's not a problem, but it's the side. So this is just an example of, you're going to go in, and our radars have a lot of capability, but that radar on the bottom right, it gets what's called attenuated. It means the rain is so strong, we can't see more than a few miles in front of the airplane from the radar perspective. They could not see the eye of this hurricane inbound. They did not see that those scallops were there, and they got rocked. Not that much you can do about it. The airplane will be okay. We'll keep going. But just an example that not all eyes are circular and fun, okay? This eye of Hurricane Milton here, as a Category 5, had what we call mesovortices to it. So all those little curvatures, all those little tiny cyclones within the broader big eye wall circulation, it breaks down into these little tiny vortices. And that can kind of enhance the turbulence, bring the turbulence up, and add a little bit of an extra ride. Now, you might get lucky and get an 8-mile eye. Great. It takes 2 minutes to cross the eye. You might get a little unlucky in like that Hurricane Milton flight when it was a Cat 5, sub 900 millibars with a 4-mile eye. We're only in that eye for less than a minute. And again, we're descending in and ascending out. So it happens really, really fast. So yeah, you might get that 20-mile eye and you got a few minutes to work with in the eye, but sometimes we encounter those little tiny eyes and it can get pretty rough. So just a little bit before we close out here, what do we measure? We're measuring the storm intensity, the surface pressure, right? Now, surface pressure is pretty hard to measure. So we drop those dropsondes in it. We can extrapolate to the surface. But I want to make you appreciate it's actually pretty hard to measure the intensity of the storm. We drop the sondes. We have ways of measuring it. We got various instruments on board. We use that as a collective. No single instrument is going to solely tell us about the storm. We have to use instrumentation as a collective. So we're measuring storm intensity. We want storm size. That impacts surge. How big is the storm's wind field? It's not just about how strong it is. If it's really, really big, the impacts are going to be far-ranging. So we want to talk about storm size. Rain. How much is it going to rain? The number one killer in storms is storm surge and inland flooding. It's not the wind. You run from the, right? You hide from the wind, but you run from the rain. The water is the number one killer, the storm surge or the flooding. So we got to know how much it's raining. We got to know how big the storm is, so we know how much storm surge that may happen when it makes landfall. And severe weather, there's tornadoes. Milton made landfall, there was a lot of tornadoes in southeast Florida. Ocean wave height, how big are the waves, right? It's storm surge and then the waves on top. That's how big your wave line's gonna, or big your ocean line's gonna be for flooding. And I know this is a little bit trickier down here, but we want to know what the structure of the eye is. Is it tilting with height? Is it straight up? Because that tells us a little bit about what's going to maybe happen in the storm in the future. And then one of our key instruments is the Doppler radar. We'll tell you more about there afterwards if you want to, but essentially it's what you see on TV. It provides a 3D picture of the storm. It's like a CAT scan of the storm. So every time we fly through the eye, and this is only on our P3 aircraft and our G4 aircraft, you fly through that storm center, we get a three-dimensional picture of the entire eye every single time we fly through it. So extremely valuable data for understanding the structure. And the models, the high-resolution hurricane models that are some of the best models for forecasting strength, they take this data and it makes that intensity forecast a lot better. So it's really important for us to get this Doppler radar data in the storm. And we're constantly advancing. So we're a research laboratory at NOAA. We do the operational mission. This Hurricane Center gets us out there. We get the information about the storm, but our goal is to also advance technology. What's the future? How are we going to measure storms better in the future? And these are all the kinds of things, new types of expendables, new type of ocean measurements, new types of drones that we're flying out. Maybe a different type of remote sensor that operates a wind LiDAR. It measures winds in clear air. Really hard to do, right? And again, it's a collective. Our aircraft is a laboratory, and the instrumentation is a collective. So as we look in the future, we're going to advance technology. We're going to make the models better. Data makes models better. So we're going to improve the models, improve how models use data. And really in the future, we have aging aircraft at NOAA. So our future now is to replace the Gulfstream 4 with the Gulfstream 550. And then we're going to be replacing our P3s here at the end of the decade with C-130s. Now, amongst all this stuff that we've talked about, the data, the impact, appreciate the people, right? We have excellent crews. We have amazing trained professionals that fly on these aircraft. We take our safety training seriously. We teach crew resource management, how we communicate on the airplane, how we talk to one another, how we solve problems on the airplane. But at the end of the day, my favorite part of the job, yes, it's getting the data to you, getting an understanding of what that storm is, but you don't do it without the excellent people that we fly in this airplane. So we just wanted to appreciate Billy and Dan. These are some of the greatest people you could ever work with. And we don't want to leave that message that these people, we are dedicated, we work really hard. We will go through the 12, 16-hour days to get you data, and we love every minute of it. So we are here for hurricane preparedness. That just a little barcode there for the Weather Service links to just understanding how to prepare with hurricane season upon us. What kit do I need to have? Where do I get my information? That's really critical. Where are you going to get your accurate information? Know where you're going to get that information, right? Know how it's vetted. Know where you're going to get it. TV, news, right? Know where you're getting it. And then when it does occur, how do I respond? How do I recover? So there's information here. We're happy to talk about it. And then obviously this expo really is about that preparedness. It is hurricane season. We're ready to go. Our aircraft are ready to go. And I tell you, we're really looking forward to it. We hope we don't have to fly, right? We hope we don't see us over here, obviously, but we're ready if you need it. So we're ready to fly this season. Thanks. And we do have, I think, some time for some questions, so we just ask to use the mic, and we'll do our best.
Due to the budget and personnel cuts, are you going to have enough resources to be able to take care of us this summer?
We're going to be operating fine this season. We've got the crews to operate the aircraft, the instrumentation. We're all set for the season. We're not going to talk about budget and everything, but this mission, we understand the criticality of it, and we're going to respond every time that we can to respond to the storm environment and get you the information we need.
Thank you.
No other questions? Like, what's it like to fly? What's in a hurricane? I love it. I mean, have you ever gotten sick? Have you? These are the common ones we get. And yes, I have gotten sick a couple of times.
Well,
it happens.
that P3 that you saw,
Yep.
that you put up there, it looks a lot smaller than a C-130. Isn't a C-130 one of those huge freight planes?
Yeah, so a C-130 is designed for cargo and hauling. The P3 is actually a little bit better for the low altitude stuff that we do. The P3 is an amazing aircraft throughout all of history. It's just the C-130 has more funding because the hauling capabilities. When we do get the C-130Js, though, it'll give us a tremendous amount of more space because we're going to utilize it better than our counterparts. So we're going to have roll-on science equipment and racks, so we can have more scientists on board.
Okay.
You had a question over here. Can you
sure.
use the mic? They're bolted down, so when the plane moves, you're moving. There's nothing. Oh yeah, like truck drivers, how they have that shot. Yeah, that'd be great if we had that.
I think I would get I think I would get sicker, actually, probably. I want to move with the airplane. Yeah, I want to move with the airplane. It's more comfortable up front than in the back. If you're in the back, it kind of drags back there, and it's really hot because the radar equipment's back there. Typically, when we fly media, and believe me, there are some media people who will not admit, but they vomited most of their flight. Okay. Unfortunately, they just got to go in the back because they went on trigger the rest of us. Yeah, a typical flight for us is about 8 hours. We average 7 to 8 hours. That's not all storm. The max we'll fly in a storm environment is about 4.5, 5 hours. A 3-pass is typically about a 3.5 hour in storm, and it just depends on how far it is. It could be 3 hours away. It could be right off your doorstep. When we fly the Gulf storms, we take off and you're pretty much at sampling.
Hey, excuse me. I was in the Navy for 6 years, and I know we flew P3s for a little while, but they just phased out to P8s. Are you guys going to P8s or?
Oh, absolutely not. No, P8s, never mind. I'm not getting into that. So the P8 is a high altitude aircraft, a Boeing 737 type style aircraft. We need to use propellers for that instantaneous thrust, vice a jet engine spooling up. So that's why we use props. So if anyone has that question, solve that. But we are not going to P8s. We're going to go to C-130Js.
Yeah. And
You think of pilots, automatic pilot, and they sit there and they laugh. You guys really, it looks like you're really working the whole time that you're
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So how did this all, like, did somebody figure out these calculations and say you all started this? Or did a lot of people die going into a hurricane? I mean, it seems like it's very complicated, the way you do it successfully and not, I don't die now.
Okay. So after every flight and every mission set that we do something called like a hot wash where we'll come together and we'll lessons learned, things we could do better. So we're constantly improving not only as a crew but as an organization to how we can be better. So it's through the years that we've been doing this of collective data that we've just gotten safer and safer and safer.
so fact, we started, not we, I mean, I'm not that old, but like 1943 was the first flight into a hurricane, okay? Pretty much immediately. It was done on a dare. We can tell you the story out there about I was a bet with the Royal Air Force and our crews in Galveston about flying on instruments. They went out there, flew a hurricane. Within the year, that's when Operational Hurricane Reconnaissance started. So this is an operation that has more than 80 years, about 80 years of experience of what to do and what not to do, what's safe, what's not safe to do, and we fly with a big safety margin. Like I said, we do a lot of training. We have a lot of experience, and we will absorb that experience and learn lessons and move on. Yeah. Sometimes finding the center of a storm is really hard. Yeah, a perfect circle, a nice, mature, perfect circle, that's easy. We'll just go geometrically to the center. When you get those little circulations and stuff, they can bring the pressure down near the eye wall, and it's what we call asymmetric. So at that point, I'm just following the winds. So I'm going to follow the winds. It's probably going to take me to that location, but again, safety of flight, I'm not going to put the airplane potentially winged into an eye wall at an angle. I want to go in perpendicular to the wind and the eye wall. So if that circulation is tucked up against one of the eye wall, we'll do it. We just do a close approach to it. I'll bring the winds down as much as I can, drop the sun, turn outbound, and safely get out by the flight. Yeah. All right, we'll be outside for more questions for a couple more hours, but thanks for hearing about us.
Thank you.
Let's give them a hand. Come on.